Welcome. Thank you all for joining us today on this very important topic. I'm Carrie Burns, the Chief Strategy Officer here for the Cleveland Metro Bar Association. I also want to welcome our friends from the Columbus Bar Association. Thank you for joining us today for this program. We're here today to celebrate Law Day. Law Day was established in 1958 by President Dwight Eisenhower as a day of dedication to the principles of government and the rule of law. The Law Day theme for this year, set by the American Bar Association, is Voices of Democracy. It recognizes that in democracies, the people rule. For nearly 250 years, Americans have expressed their political views and wishes by speaking their minds and voting in elections. In 2024, the United States will hold its 60th presidential election, and Americans will address fundamental questions about democracy and the rule of law. More specifically today, we will talk about a lawyer's role in our democracy. We've seen it at local, state, and national levels. Systems that have been put in place and agreed upon by citizens are being ignored. As lawyers, we have a unique responsibility to uphold the Constitution and the laws of the land. Today, we will talk about that responsibility and how important it is to have lawyers involved in their communities. We are going to be taking questions today, so please use the chat or the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen. We'll get to those questions as they arise. I know there's a little bit of CLE housekeeping too. I think there's going to be a poll that pops up in the middle, so make sure you click the link when that comes so we can tell the Supreme Court you are here. And then finally, at the end of the program, you will receive an emailed survey to you. Please make sure you fill that out in its entirety, because that is how we report to the court. All right, now for introductions. First, we have Lauren Reichlin. Lauren is a board member and the executive director of Lawyers Defending American Democracy, an organization devoted to protecting democracy and the rule of law. A nationally known speaker, trainer, author, and consultant, she is also president for the Reichlin Institute of Strategic Leadership. Lauren is the editor of the 2023 book, Her Honor, Stories of Challenge and Triumph from Women Judges, and the author of more than 225 articles, including topical commentary and op-ed pieces. Lauren is a former law firm equity partner and founder of her firm's environmental law practice. For 20 years, she was recognized in Best Lawyers in America. She was also recognized in Chambers USA, America's leading business lawyers, and Massachusetts super lawyers. The recipient of numerous awards, Lauren was honored with a Margaret Brent Women Lawyers of Achievement Award from the American Bar Association's Commission on Women in the Profession, and was named by Public Media's Next Avenue as one of the 50 most influential people in aging. Next, we have Bill Weisenberg. Bill served with the Ohio State Bar Association for 35 years, culminating as Assistant Executive Director for Governmental Relations, Media, and Public Relations and Diversity Initiatives. Among his many activities, he served on the Ohio Commission on Dispute Resolution and Conflict Management as an appointee of then Chief Justice of the Supreme Court of Ohio. His American Bar Association activities include service on the ABA Board of Governors, chair of the former Standing Committee on Judicial Independence, chair of the Standing Committee on Government Affairs, co-vice chair of the Special Committee on Preservation of the Justice System, and currently as a member of the ABA House of Delegates, where he serves as a special advisor to the Committee on Issues of Concern to the Profession. Bill currently serves as vice chair of the Cornerstones of Democracy Commission and as a member of the advisory committee to the ABA Task Force on Democracy. He is a recipient of the Ohio Bar Medal, the highest award from the Ohio State Bar Association, and several other national organizations. Bill lists his current status as fictitiously retired, and I tend to agree with the amount of involvement you have, Bill. So thank you so much, Lauren and Bill, for being here this afternoon. I'm going to start right off the bat with our first question to Lauren. Let's talk about why protecting democracy is not a partisan issue.
Thank you. Thanks for the warm introduction, and thanks for starting with such an important question. I think that as lawyers, when we talk about democracy today, we should all be framing the conversation in clear language that helps people recognize why there is, in fact, a crisis. We need to speak in the context of protecting hard-won freedoms and the rule of law. And in particular, lawyers have a critically important role in helping the public understand that the rule of law itself is the foundational underpinning to all that we treasure. So I just want to offer a few very quick data points from organizations that are really the gold standard for providing impartial data. The World Justice Project defines our rule of law as a durable system of laws, institutions, norms, and community commitment that provides accountability, open government, just law, and accessible and impartial justice. The World Justice Project Rule of Law Index is an annual exhaustive analysis of how 142 countries compare on vital rule of law rankings. And in the most recent ranking, the overall score for the United States has again declined, as it has over the last number of years, and its global ranking is only 26 out of 142. The International Institute for Democracy and Electoral Assistance measures global democratic trends around the globe. They report that since 2015, the United States has experienced significant declines in civil liberties, social rights and equality, and judicial independence. This decline is in the face of what they describe as this country's historically strong protections for preserving its democratic institutions, the rule of law, and fundamental rights. So again, more backsliding. Pew Research, which has monitored public trust in government for decades, reports that trust in government itself is at an historic low. And the same goes for any recent measure of trust and confidence in the Supreme Court. But trust and confidence is essential to protecting the rule of law and protecting democracy. So by every expert analysis, we are seeing increasing signs of authoritarianism, particularly in the form of rapidly exploding disinformation and shockingly open displays of white supremacy, which feeds bias at every level. And now we're seeing that extremism is becoming mainstreamed and normalized. And we have to remember that it fits an extremist agenda to label all efforts to call extremism out as political. So why is this all important? Because our profession cannot allow democracy to be bullied out of the debate by messages that sound like simple partisan differences, but in reality hide a far more dangerous message. So for bar associations, we should all be seeing protecting democracy as a responsibility that belongs to each one of us. And having this conversation today in the Bar Association context is to remove these issues from a partisan or political framing.
Thanks, Lauren. Bill, do you have anything to add there?
I think thanks for having us today, Carrie, and we thank the Cleveland Metropolitan Bar and the Columbus Bar for hosting this very important event. And today, the theme, of course, is Voices of Democracy. And lawyers have important voices to play, and I think Lauren set that stage. I think today we face a dilemma, and that is that the general public doesn't really wake up every day and think about this. And an informed electorate is an essential part of a democratic society. Not long ago, former Associate Justice Stephen Breyer was being interviewed at a Bar Association meeting. And the final question to Justice Breyer was a rather intriguing question. It was asked by the ABA president at that moment. And the question was simply, Justice Breyer, what do you think the founders were thinking when they left Independence Hall in 1787? And Justice Breyer, not to mince words, was quick to respond. If you don't participate, it won't work. And what he meant by that if we don't participate, then our Constitution cannot work. It cannot exist. It cannot survive. So we as lawyers have a very special role to play in our democracy. I think back 55 years ago when I became a lawyer and I took the oath. And I remember the oath I took specifically in the state of Ohio. And I went back and I refreshed my recollection. And let me just read it to you quickly, because I think those lawyers and judges listening today will remember when they raised their right hand years ago and basically said, I will support the Constitution and laws of the United States and the Constitution and laws of Ohio, and will abide by the rules of professional conduct. That oath provides to us a responsibility, a duty to preserve, defend, protect the Constitution and the rule of law, the foundation of a democratic society. And I think, as Lauren said today, that the rule of law and the tenets of democracy are under siege. They're in peril. We read about it daily. So the question I think we want to talk with you about today, and Lawyers Defending Democracy, I went to a program in Louisville, walked out of it and said, this may be the most important program I've gone to in a long time, because it reinforced my belief and the belief of everyone in the room at that moment that we have a unique special responsibility with regard to our democracy if we are to continue the great strength of this country. And so, I think, in the conversation we're going to have, what is it that we as lawyers have a unique and special responsibility to do? Some refer to us as the guardians of the Constitution. That when we take that oath, and day in and day out, when we perform the duties incumbent upon us as lawyers and as judges, that one of the foremost responsibilities we have is to ensure that the Constitution thrives, that it's preserved, defended, that people understand it, and that we have a unique and special responsibility in addition to that to work with the public, to educate, to understand that it's not just lawyers who have this responsibility. Citizens, we as citizens have that responsibility. And we go back to the first words we read in the Constitution. We, the people. We as lawyers are part of the people, but it's the people of this country, of this great society, who have the ultimate responsibility to work towards making sure that the rule of law and our constitutional democracy stays firm and intact. So that's, I think, why we're here today to celebrate Law Day, because it's just as lawyers, each and every one of us needs to be a voice of democracy to make sure that our country continues along the lines we are today. So I will defer back to you, since you have all the questions.
Thanks, Bill. I appreciate that. Lauren, I would love to back up a little bit and hear about Lawyers Defending American Democracy, why this organization was formed, what is some of the work that you guys are doing at a national level?
Thank you. Thank you for asking that. So we were founded about 5 years ago because of the need to galvanize the legal profession to do and say more in the face of threats to our democratic institutions and the rule of law. It really, if you look at our board, a number of us are deeply engaged in the bar association life at the ABA level and state and national, federal, regional bars. We all have a commitment to bar service and to the profession, but we wanted to see the voice of the profession speaking more loudly and more prominently about what is happening to democracy, because, as Bill just framed, it's our job, it's our role, it's our core responsibility. So we at LDAD really came together to figure out, how do we get people to speak up more? What can we offer to help that? So we speak in a number of different ways, through calls to action when we see real attacks on democracy, asking people to sign on in various ways to unjust new laws or changes that in policy that are happening. We do a lot of writing. We have brought legal ethics complaints against lawyers who have violated their obligations to the rules of professional conduct for their role in trying to overturn a free and fair election. We have filed amicus briefs in certain cases. We were involved with another nonprofit organization in drafting an actual model code of conduct for the Supreme Court. This was about a year ago, and we said, what should a model code actually look like for Supreme Court justices today? Unfortunately, that's not the one that was adopted, but we do our best. So we try in various ways to model behaviors that other lawyers can look at and say, I want to join, I want to participate. And in that regard, we're very gratified by that response. And just one other thing I would just want to speak to, which is we have created something called the Democracy Commitment, which lives on a tab on our website. And it's an effort to ask lawyers to do something to do as Bill and I were saying before, to speak up and understand that you as a lawyer can take a step to engage in your own community, in your neighborhood, in your region, in your state, federally, as a lawyer to protect the rule of law. So the Democracy Commitment itself is a sign-on document listing a variety of ways lawyers can make a difference. We offer it as a blueprint for how we can use our convening skills, our advocacy skills, our knowledge of the law to help educate the public. As Bill mentioned, civic engagement. How can we be leaders in that effort? So we just try to writ large look at where there is a need for the legal profession to speak up and step in on these core issues. And that's what we're trying to accomplish.
Thanks. I would imagine a lot of your partners in this effort are bar associations. Bill, you're clearly a bar association guy from reading your bio today. Let's talk about, we've talked about individual lawyers and their duty, but what about as bar associations? So then there's a difference too, and we can get into a little bit of that. Ohio, not a mandatory bar. These are voluntary bars. We are a metropolitan bar association between Cleveland and Columbus. So a little bit different than how other states operate, but what is the role of a bar association in its community? Bill, let's start with you.
Well, Carrie, bar associations are leader. As an entity, needs to be a leader. It needs to be out front. I can think of no better example today as we are talking about both Cleveland and as well as Columbus. But let me start with Cleveland. In 2006, the Cleveland Bar Association, Metropolitan Bar Association, wasn't Metropolitan Bar at that time, but the Cleveland Bar Association created a program called the 3 R's. Rights, responsibilities, realities. My longtime friend Hugh McKay, very instrumental in that many years ago. Since that time, over 3,000 lawyers, judges, paralegals, law students have serviced over 37,000 students in our schools, high schools across the Cleveland area. To understand and appreciate the Constitution, but also how to achieve their goals beyond high school, how to become productive and informed citizens, how to become engaged in the community. And so that program, started by a bar association, was very instrumental in the community. It showed leadership. Many years ago in Columbus, part of my earlier years, I was part of a program called the People's Law School and participated in that with my colleagues. And it was people from the community at that time, mostly older people who came to those meetings. And we tried to imbue in them what the legal system was about, what our democracy was about. And so the bar associations have done remarkable things. Bar associations, as Lauren alluded to, it was the ABA in particular, the model rules of professional conduct, model rules of judicial conduct, the attempt to get the Supreme Court to adopt a model code of ethics. Not exactly what we were hoping they would adopt, but there was a resolution before the House of Delegates that Lauren and I were engaged in that passed without really anybody opposing it because it was the right thing to do. But bar associations And the members of the Bar Association do a lot by being out in the community, by having programs that educate people based on basic civic education, how the community can become engaged in civic engagement, how we can be open to the conversation. But one of the things I think bar associations are evolving in today is the concept of what some people refer to as learning to listen and then listening to learn. And what we mean by that is that we as lawyers and bar association cannot presume that what we think we know what is of the greatest concern to the community. And by going into the community, by listening to what they believe are the most important issues and problems they face, and then by listening to them, we can then work with communities to engage them, so that they can be engaged in their problem solving, so they understand that compromise is not a dirty word, that compromise is a value that is inherent in having a successful democracy, in developing community. And bar associations are uniquely qualified to do that. The Ohio State Bar Association, just a year ago, in a program called My Rights Ohio, did some vignettes for students. And it was interesting. What did the students want to know about? Police stops. What happens if they're stopped by the police? What if they see the George Floyd situation? Can they take their cell phone out and record it? What happens? What they're working today on? What about the search of a locker in a school building? What rights do they have? Also, what responsibilities do they have? Because with that comes, the two have to go together. Bar associations are uniquely situated to take that on. And I know from my experience in Ohio and also across the country over many years, that bar associations have been very innovative in working in communities. And part of the reason is that lawyers play a very special role through their bar associations by demonstrating and serving as examples of civic education. Serving on boards, serving as public officials. They then have leadership roles where they involve themselves in the community. And that demonstrates itself with bar association take leadership when the bench and bar come together to engage in conversations about how to pursue, democracy-oriented projects. So bar associations play a unique role. And, you mentioned, and we'll probably get to that later, voluntary bar associations that we have in Ohio and in a good number of states can do that rather freely. You're going to get to the situation where the majority of bars in this country are not voluntary. They're called unified or mandatory bars. And they have been undergoing now for the last 30 plus years, some issues dealing with a Supreme Court decision called Keller in 1990, which we'll get to. But bar associations do a great deal. And I think as I referred to just a moment ago, 18 years ago or so, when the Cleveland Bar started 3 Rs, it started a movement. And that's been replicated across the country. So bars do play a role, and they're very successful when they continue that over a period of time.
Thank you for your kind words about 3 Rs. I appreciate that. Lauren.
Yeah, so just a few thoughts. I'm a former president of the Boston Bar Association. Very, very, we like to claim the oldest bar association in the country. And I think back to the role that the Boston Bar played historically in so many important issues that were happening in our state, and how they used their leadership and authority as knowledgeable legal experts to bring people together in difficult times. And there are few more difficult times than Boston, actually, in the 1970s at the height of the forced busing crisis, where busing was used as a tool to integrate schools under federal court order. there was violence, there was horrible turmoil, and the Boston Bar was the entity that really stepped up as a convener, as a leader to help bring people together, to bring major stakeholders in the community to talk about what can be done to stem this crisis. And it's a role that we need to replicate over and over again, especially today, because it is so important. And I think that the other part of the importance of bar associations that we miss too often, because what we often hear is, well, we can't get involved because we'll lose members. I say that involvement is a membership development tool. That we need to think about about involvement and engagement as a way to bring in particularly younger generations who are seeking engagement and involvement. Every piece of data that you look at around younger people today shows that they're looking for meaning in their work and looking for meaningful engagement. So when bar executives or bar leaders say, oh, young people just don't want to get involved anymore, that's not the right question. The question you have to ask is, what am I offering them to get involved in? What am I making available that gives meaning to people today who live such incredibly busy, stressed out, over-programmed lives? What am I doing that makes them feel good about themselves and feeds their soul? So I see all of the things that we're talking about today as a way to greatly enhance membership as well as accomplish really important things in our communities.
I'd like to just piggyback for a second on the very important points Lauren just made. Bar associations need to act as conveners. People will come because bar associations are uniquely situated to convene groups of people. And I know, my years at the Ohio State Bar, we had many, activities, many conferences, but also opportunities to bring people together, whether it was dealing with indigent defense, civil legal needs, other issues affecting the community. The final point that Lauren just alluded to is so important, and that is the new generation of lawyers do not just want to join an organization, they want to do something. And if we don't offer them the opportunity to become engaged in a project, in something that interests them, they will not participate with us. They want to participate, but we need to invite, we need to bring them to the table. We need to bring them in and have them actively participate and become engaged. So engagement is very critical in this new generation. And Lauren bringing that up is very important. I know in our state of Ohio and in other states across the country that I'm aware, the whole concept of engagement is very critical. If we want people to become part of organizations, and it's not just legal organizations, this is true across the board in studies that have been conducted, we need to engage people. And so if we want to pursue the quest for democracy, to maintain our democracy, we need to have the younger generation, the new generation of lawyers actively as participants and find a way to get them actively involved. Very important.
Great points. We do have a question that came in.
Love to take that one.
All right, I will read it. Our friend Bruce Hennis, thanks Bruce for the question. He agrees 100% that attorneys have a special responsibility to defend the Constitution in fulfillment of the oath we all took when we became lawyers. But there are hundreds, perhaps thousands of lawyers who are actively working to subvert the Constitution. What is it going to take to get the 300 plus bar associations across the United States to protect the rule of law? Can there be nothing done to stop these attorneys who are violating their oaths? Just this week, Time Magazine published a long interview with Donald Trump, who bluntly said that when he becomes president, the Department of Justice will no longer function independently, and instead, he will direct the DOJ to prosecute anyone at the direction of the Office of the President. Education efforts, 3 R's, serving on boards, and educating the public are both nice and necessary. But if Mr. Trump wins, the change will be abrupt. After Election Day, just 5 months away, it will be too late. Thanks for your question.
Carrie, I thank you. Thank you for that. I mean, and that question brings together every aspect of where we are today and all of the landmines we are all trying to navigate as leaders in this space. So let me start with the accountability on lawyers piece of it, because we have a team at Lawyers Defending American Democracy that grapples with this all the time. We have filed ethics complaints, as I mentioned earlier, for a number of people who we believe violated their oath. Early on, we brought complaints against John Eastman, Jeffrey Clark, Rudy Giuliani, Kenneth Paxton, the Attorney General in Texas. I mean, a number of people that we feel really have made this country more dangerous by their dishonest behavior in undermining a free and fair election, fundamental to democracy. We treat these complaints like legal briefs. This is not a dash off a complaint to the bar. They're, 18, 20, 30, 40 pages or more of detail. Here's the rule. Here's the legal argument. Here's the behavior. Here's why we think it's a violation. So we're quite careful about that. The power that comes from anybody who can file a complaint before a bar association, the importance of someone's bar license, and we use that very carefully and mindfully. So we need to be vigilant about that, all of us. The other thing in terms of where we are right now in politically in this moment, I think all the time, we're a nonprofit organization. I'm obsessed with the issue of how do we navigate what Trump says and the fact that he is indeed a candidate for president in a major political party. That is a huge, difficult thing to navigate. My true North Star here is focusing on what is said and how would that affect the Constitution and the rule of law. I think about how can we as lawyers develop rapid response teams? How can I think every bar association should be engaged in trying to coordinate rapid responses so that when we see dangerous undercutting of our judges, of the Department of Justice, of anything that impacts the rule of law in a profound way, such as we are seeing, we have an obligation to respond. It doesn't matter who says it. It is our duty. So I think we have to navigate this space. We don't get to pick who undermines the Constitution. We don't get to put people in neat buckets like, well, that's a candidate and that's another random person who's saying things that are terrifying. So we have to walk that space carefully. But we have to walk it because it really goes to the heart of what we are all trying to protect.
Thanks, Lauren. Bill, anything to add there?
Let me just add one thing, because the question is very important and very provocative. There's a lot being said today, which truly threatens the cores of a democracy. And there's been much written. A book that came out a couple of years ago, How Democracies Die, by Stephen Levinsky and Daniel Slavitt, and followed up just recently by The Tyranny of the Minority, another book. When we start to see signs of autocracy and threats to the rule of law, we as lawyers have an obligation to become even more vigilant, to speak out as to why that is a threat, why it is important that we keep the tone of the debate, above board. But we also need to be defending the democracy and not be shy away from alerting the public and our citizenry that there is a real threat. Now, words do matter. We learned that in law school. And so we need to keep a watchful eye on the words. As Lauren indicated, there are a number of lawyers out there who went way beyond the pale after the last election And a number of them have already faced certain discipline. Some are facing the loss of their license, and that will continue. You know, we all take that oath. In Ohio, it's to abide by the Ohio rules of professional conduct. Well, remember, it's the American Bar Association who developed the model rules of professional conduct, which have been adopted almost all over the country in some form or another. So bar associations are being ever more vigilant in that. And the Lawrence program, Lawyers Defending Democracy, has been very active in monitoring that. And we need to continue that. Mm-hmm. Now, what transpires in the future, whether the threats will be carried out, we are a nation of laws, and we are governed by the rule of law. And we as lawyers need to continue to emphasize that and not sit back and let that trample over the rights of our citizenry. And with rights come responsibilities. And the responsibility is to make sure that we don't sit back and not respond to those threats. Otherwise, autocracy can become what we don't want to go down the road of autocracy in this country. That's not why this country was founded. That's not why for almost 250 years we've been able to sustain ourselves as the longest serving successful democracy in history. We cannot shirk that responsibility.
Well, and to go back
to be afraid of it.
Thanks, Bill. To go back to a point Lauren made early on, combating disinformation. That's something that lawyers and bar associations have been called on to do for years now. In fact, yesterday we had Barbara McQuaid, former U.S. attorney in Michigan, at the City Club with the Bar Association, and she talked just about this. And a question that was raised was, you know, lawyers like process, lawyers like a lot of words, lawyers like, you know, long drawn out descriptions of things, and the disinformation that's coming out is short and easily digestible, and for the general public, consumable. And so how do lawyers and maybe bar associations in general, how do we combat disinformation when our rebuttal to stop the steal or the election was stolen is, you know, a 20-page white paper on why the election wasn't stolen? How can we distill these messages down to be more succinct?
So, well, I can go, and then Billy can chime in if you would like. This is okay. So that's another topic that kind of takes up a lot of space in my brain, because you know, Barbara's new book on disinformation is fantastic. You had mentioned the advisory commission to the ABA Task Force on American Democracy. I serve as vice chair of that, and in that capacity, I've been working with Bill as well on putting together a presidential showcase program at the ABA annual meeting on exactly this topic. It would be Saturday afternoon, the ABA annual meeting. And we have some very powerful panelists who are in that space. That's what they do, which is deal with the impacts of disinformation and how you combat that. One of the things that I find really interesting, I have another vice chair role at the ABA, which is the vice chair to the advisory council to the DEI Center. And I'm struck by the issue of language in both of these capacities, in the democracy capacity and in the DEI capacity, because in both of these, what we see is the hijacking of language. In the idea of turning around the language of democracy for people who are essentially, you know, in the authoritarianism space, and the hijacking of language in the DEI space really significantly. That turns words around against people who are promoting diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so what we have to do is not only call that out when we see it. I will never allow anybody to use the word woke in front of me again. There are words that I just will never let people get away with saying in front of me, without really putting making it clear what it actually means when those words are said. But in addition, we have to reclaim the language and use our own language to move forward. So one of the things we talk about in the DEI Center space is like, how do we create a campaign to get back the language? And we're actually working on that, and are actively involved in doing that. And there'll be a lot more to come in the coming months. We need to do that in the democracy space as well. We cannot let the language be turned around. And that's when I go back to, as a practical matter, just something as simple and crucial as rapid response teams. So that when, in particular, when a judge is attacked for being a judge, that we are using simple, clear language to make people understand and make the media understand that this is what judges do, and this is why it is so important. So it's a critical question, and it's going to take a lot of minds to resolve. But I think we have to start with calling it out, and then making sure that we are using the language we need to use to help people to understand. It's like when people say democracy. Now we're losing the word democracy, because how often do we now hear, well, do undemocratic things that pro-democracy people are doing? So we have to now talk about freedoms. We have to help people understand what's behind the curtain of democracy. What are the individual collective freedoms, the civil rights, the social justice gains that have been made that are at high risk from being lost, at risk of being lost by virtue of what people are proposing to do and are actually doing in many of our states right now.
Carrie, in 2018, the American Bar Association came out with a publication called Rapid Response to Fake News, Misleading Statements, and Unjust Criticism of the Judiciary. That followed up a similar document that I was engaged in when I was chair of the Standing Committee on Judicial Independence.
Bill, I'm holding it up for you as a prop.
Well, I keep it handy.
Oh, look at that! Wow.
But the point of all this is, I don't know how many bar associations today have these rapid response teams. I think the challenge in addressing this is we've got to make it simple. We cannot talk in legalese,
Right?
because the public, it's going to go over people's heads. We've got to talk in plain English and understand. But we also have to use the mediums of communication where people are getting their information. How many people are reading a daily newspaper today? How many people even pick one up at a newsstand? I don't even know if we have newsstands anymore. How many people? Most people get their stuff online. But where are they getting their stuff? Instagram, X, formerly Twitter. They get it on LinkedIn. They get it on Facebook. So we have to be able to use the most modern means of communication in the simplest fashion to explain what we're doing. I can tell you from personal experience in Ohio, where certain judges were criticized unfairly, where we were able to work with journalists to set the record straight. Now, at the same time, sometimes the criticism of our system is justified. It's not always unjust. So we have to, we have to be on both sides of the issue. We have to explain what is really occurring. And I agree with Lauren. The term democracy is a term of art. Some people say, well, we really don't have a democracy in this country. We have a republic. Remember what Franklin said? A republic, if you can keep it. And it's the name of a book that Justice Gorsuch wrote a couple of years ago. So we need to do a better job of when we talk about these things. We have a responsibility to educate at the same time so people understand. The concept of disinformation, misinformation, the civic literacy survey that just came out said that was one of the biggest problems we had, blame the spread of misinformation and disinformation for weakening democracy. I think it would be very interesting. I'm sorry I didn't get the chance to hear Barbara McQuaid yesterday, but sometimes I think it would be interesting to define what we mean by misinformation and disinformation, and what are the facts? Because now everything is mismatched around, and I think part of the problem we face as a society, too many people are not sure what the facts really are. And I think that's something where lawyers can play a role in trying to digest that, but explain it in a simple manner without using a lot of legal terms. And we should ban the use of any Latin terms in trying to explain any of that today. But I think those are things we need, and we are doing this. But I want to emphasize something. We as lawyers, whether it's the American Bar Association, the State Bar Association, the local Bar Association, we cannot do it alone. We need to create collaboration with the business community, with other entities, to join forces, to come together, to speak with one voice and speak out in defense of democracy. Part of this is being done, as you may know, at the Ohio State University Morris College of Law, to the Divided Community Project, and some programs they put together with our good friend Carl Smallwood, who is Lauren's co-vice chair of our advisory commission. Democracy chair. I give equal time to both of them because I believe in collaboration. But I think that's what we really need to be doing, and that goes back just for 1 second what Lauren alluded to a long time ago. As conveners, we need to be bringing all those people together. And that's part of the listening tours that the ABA is engaged in. And at 1:30 this afternoon, if you're so inclined, you can watch the listening tour from the National Constitution Center celebrating Law Day. And that will be the topic of discussion this afternoon.
If I could just add something, Carrie, on this point too, when we talk about the language, which is so important, and what different things mean. When the Lawyers Defending American Democracy has just launched a brand new project in which we are working with college students to scale an effort that began at Amherst College, getting students to take a pledge to work in a pro-democracy organization during their time on campus. We are working with these 5 brilliant, amazing college students to scale this now and to bring it nationally. And we have expanded the pledge to include the Working for Pro-Democracy organization, but to pledge to vote in federal, state, and local elections. So not just like go vote in November, but become a voter, become a concerned, active member of the community. But I bring this up for a particular reason. When we began our meetings with these students, and we've been spending months getting ready to launch this program, and what tools would we need and how to do it and what to name it, we, Lawyers Defending American Democracy, thought, well, we'll call it Students Defending American Democracy. Of course, that makes all the sense in the world. They pushed back on that and they said, no, we want to be Students Strengthening American Democracy, because what we learned in our experience at Amherst, getting people to take the pledge, is a typical reaction is, what am I defending? What am I protecting? I'm already seeing the loss of civil rights. I'm already seeing losses in social justice areas that I care about, a lack of interest in the climate crisis. So we want to convey that we are going to be strengthening something. So we call them Students Strengthening American Democracy, which is a project of LDAD. But so I think that that's an important learning moment for us, and for certainly Western for LDAD, and I hope for all of us, that when we think about language, we have to think about how it's being perceived in a whole variety of different audiences.
Thank you. We have another question. Speaking of voting, defending democracy includes getting people to vote. Voting turnout in Cleveland is very low, lower than 10% in some precincts, not across the city. What is the role of lawyers and bar associations with regard to improving turnout? Bill, do you want to start?
Let me start by saying, I think as lawyers, we need to educate people on why voting is important. why it's fundamental to democracy. But once again, I think it gets back to, we can't do it alone. We have to be, it has to be a collaborative effort, working in the community, in the precincts in the community, in the inner cities, in the schools, in the community organizations, as to why voting is important. We need to be working with the clergy. We need to be working with business people in that community. We need to be in the schools in the community. We need to be where the action is, where the people are. You know, we have a fundamental, we can play a role, but we are not alone. We cannot do it. And I think I think and I don't think we as lawyers should lay claim to we can solve all these problems. Right. We can convene, we can collaborate, we can work with others. A statistic, some data that's come out recently, which is really disturbing. The 18 to 29-year-old vote, they're talking that many, a high percentage, don't plan to vote this year. That's staggering. The question is, how many 18-year-olds, young people, when they have the opportunity, when they're registered to vote and they turn 18, how many of them are actually voting and will vote time after time after time? And that's an educational effort. We as lawyers can do all we want. You know, some people have said one of the most important things in the inner cities in Cleveland, I follow very closely because I live up here now, is how many people are actually registered to vote. If they're not registered to vote, then they can't vote. How many people take the time to vote, you know, and go down to vote? Do we need to make voting easier? We have so many issues out there. But I think as lawyers, we can play a role, but we can't do it alone. And for us to believe that is I think is a mistake. But we can bring people together. But those I've identified, whether it's the business community, small businesses in the community, the clergy, law enforcement, everybody needs to participate. It gets back to what I referred to earlier. If you don't participate, it won't work. So we have to grow the participation level if we want voting to really become more meaningful and increase the percentage of people voting. That's my own personal view.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly all of that is so critical. I mean, Bill said everything that needs to be said on the voting side. I just would add to that. I think the need for us to think as lawyers too about protecting the voting system and what has to be done. Bill, we had been talking earlier about the Brennan Center today came out with a new survey, new data, really terrifying statistics around what is happening to our election system today. It is unfathomable. 38% of local election officials report experiencing threats, harassment, or abuse. 38% of election officials. Of those, 2/3 say that they were threatened in person, or similarly threatened over the phone. Other data included 62% of election officials are worried about political leaders engaging in efforts to interfere, how they do their jobs. I mean, I would encourage people to take a look at this data, look at how many feel their family has been threatened, that their job is the ability to do their job is at risk, not because like the regular people who worry about getting fired, they're worried about getting killed or harmed or being unable to be safe, sitting at the poll, helping you as a voter vote. That is a crisis in this country that we as lawyers are uniquely positioned to solve. I know I will, give a shout out to the EOLDN, the election official lawyer protection network that is trying to match lawyers to election workers who need help. And, we can all, provide information for people to who want to get involved in that. But that is an example of trying to creatively come up with ways that lawyers can make a difference in this space. But the issue of voting is so basic to what it is that we're trying to save and protect. And when I talked about the democracy commitment before, that lawyers Defending American Democracy is asking lawyers to sign and become involved in what, you know, an open statement of what it is that they can actually do. One of the things we say is that we stand for is impartiality in the vote count, accurate reporting of the vote count, the ability to resolve disputes in courts and not through threats and harassment. These are things today we have to worry about in our election system. And we as lawyers have to step up and start to do that and get involved.
Yeah, something as simple as being a poll worker.
Absolutely.
It's a Saturday, I did it last general election, a Saturday morning class and then election day, and having a lawyer there and understanding what can be done and what can't be done goes a long way. So, and that's an easy low bar, and the Supreme Court gives you 4 hours of CLE credit for it.
Yeah.
Yeah, Ohio, it's been doing that a couple of election cycles now. I just like to add on, I think part of the problem we face now, and it's misinformation, disinformation. The last few election cycles, election administrators all over the country were saying publicly that the elections were the safest and most secure elections in history. Our own Secretary of State said that in 2020, Frank LaRose. Across the country, election officials who have been part of the conversations in these listening tours have talked about it. The people who really know how elections are being done, ask the poll workers. The poll workers will tell you that they're there, they work hard. There are no shenanigans. And if a question comes up, they resolve it on the spot. Lauren talked with the lawyers defending democracy. Lawyers as poll workers, in addition to being poll workers, just work, being available at the Board of Elections on election day when these issues arise to give guidance and counsel and assistance to the people working the polls is so important. And when it comes to whether or not the elections are secure and safe, it was a bipartisan group of lawyers led by, Ben Ginsburg, former Senator John Danforth, Mike Ludig, Ted Olson, former Senator Gordon Smith, who wrote a fabulous paper called Lost But Not Stolen, where they reviewed all the cases from the 2020 election and found not one scintilla of evidence of there being fraud. And so they entitled it Lost But Not Stolen. But unfortunately, in this country today, the public is being sold a bill of goods. And now we hear election integrity, irregularities. Sure, there are problems, but people need to have faith in their elections. We need to be listening to the poll workers who work diligently at the polls. We don't have a serious problem out there. Sure, we can always improve things, but let's not have the public believe that the system is in chaos, because that's a phony argument and there's no proof to the contrary on that. And as lawyers, we have a responsibility to speak out, but not just lawyers, leaders in the business community, leaders in commerce and industry, across the board. We need to be talking together to ensure that the public has trust and confidence. Because if we don't have trust and confidence in our election system, and we don't vote and participate, the system cannot thrive and prosper. Fundamental tenet of American democracy is voting, free and fair elections, respect for the outcome of the elections, and peaceful transfer of power. That is what distinguishes a democracy. And when that fails, democracies die. And we cannot afford that in the United States of America, because we, the people, have a responsibility to ensure that we continue along those lines of a free and fair society. That's what lawyers and bar association need to be out there doing, and bringing people together to collaborate on getting that message out loud and clear. And that's what the Task Force for American Democracy is attempting to do and working diligently. And Lauren and I, in our work with the advisory, is it the advisory committee or I don't know, I forget what we're
Legal
called.
Bar Association.
we work on so many different groups. Try to keep it, where we are is hard. But we're never going to, I will tell you this, we're never going to give up on this. This is so important. And I can't tell you how appreciative I am. I speak for Lauren and the entire ABA on the program you put together today.
Well, I
It's
appreciate
been a
both of
pleasure.
you. Yeah, Lauren, final thoughts.
Thank you. Really quickly, I guess I would just say, get involved, feel ownership of where we are in this country today, and do something that matters. Understand that disinformation is lying. It is intentionally telling you something that is untrue. The media needs to be able to use that word and help people understand when a lie is a lie. Everyone is entitled to their own opinion. They are not entitled to their own facts. We have to be very clear about that. We must reclaim the language of democracy. And we have to think as bar associations in terms of our rapid response capacity and do what we can in the years ahead to step up and take ownership of these issues, work with people across the generations to make a difference so that our kids and our grandkids are not going through the times that we are going through right now.
Well, thank you, Lauren. Thank you, Bill. I really appreciate this discussion. Thank you all for being here and your great questions. That concludes our program for today. Everyone have a great afternoon. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you all.